series stopped operating trams in 1933 when its tramway services were amalgamated into the London Passenger Transport Committee, which was formed from many of the other bodies providing public transport at this time. Tram services continued to run for around about another 20 years, 19 to be precise, and they stopped running in 1952. They have, of course, now come back. So since the millennium, they've come back to many parts of the capital, famously in South London and in Croydon. So, although the London County Council had an interest in tramways, they were the largest provider of tramways. They were, of course, by no means the only provider of public transport at the time. And the transport scene was dominated by the Underground Group, which controlled most of the underground railways, the Tube, as we would call it today, buses, and actually had 3 tram lines of its own. The Underground Group, as I'm sure an erudite audience such as yourself will know, was very famous for their use of posters and design to advertise their services, we call it today, but also to glamorise their services as well. And this, they were famous for being a patron of the arts, and they're famous for being, real kind of pioneers in driving design forward, particularly under the auspices of Frank Pick. And indeed, the Underground Group started producing posters to advertise its services in 1908. And 14 years later, sort of aware that there was the success of this project, the London County Council decided to follow suit. It's not that the London County Council hadn't had advertising on their trams and on their other services and their other associated services, but they had a policy of only using it to sort of generate direct revenue using the services, so to sell that as advertising space, which would go back to the service. So 1922 is when they start to use some of that space to advertise their own services effectively, to generate revenue in a less direct way. And on the screen here, we can see 2 examples of what would become their famous tramway art, their tramway posters, which were produced at 12 a year between 1922 and 1932. So we can see these are obviously interior shots of an LCC tram, and you can see, I'll just bring the pointer out, you can see that these posters feature these rectangular features at the front here and there. So for the benefit of the people at home, it's not the brightest, the clearest of images. On the image on the left, you can see the conductor on the tram there, and just to his left, there's a London Tramways poster for Brockwell Park. And the image on the right-hand side, we don't have people in this one, but we can see the central aisle, and we can see a poster for London Zoo on the left-hand side there. 12 posters, as I say, 12 posters a year were made between 1922 and 1932, and we have a very extensive but not complete collection here at the London County Council and the London Metropolitan Archives. Third time lucky. The London Archives. I got there in the end. So, why so many words? Why am I getting so confused? So, the London Archives, formerly London Metropolitan Archives, is the successor body to the successor archive for the London County Council. So we hold the London County Council's archive, and obviously being the body responsible for producing these posters, many of them live in our collections. As I say, we have an extensive but not complete collection, and the other sort of usual suspects have collections as well. The London Transport Museum, London Museum. There's some in private hands as well. So they are they're not unique, but they are rare, and they don't come up sort of for private sale very often. So they are quite a special thing that we have. So we're very happy to have them, and because we're very happy to have them, we're also very happy to take care of them and display them as well. So as I said, they'll be on display in our iconic document display area until the 26th of June. And when anything goes on display, it does need a little bit of TLC. And there's been an ongoing conservation project associated with this collection since 2021. And what we have here is just a couple of details to show you what needs to be done before they get ready to go on display. So repairing fractures or tears has to be done. That's done with a combination of Japanese paper and starch. And also, as they get a bit dog-eared and battered over the almost the century that they've been in existence. So we also need to repair the corners and things as well. You see an example of that there. And we can see the sort of the before and after. And we can see the before and after the conservation on this slide here. You can see that the corners have been repaired. If we do spot the difference, we can see corners there, and also that there's been some repairing on the fractures as well. But actually, they've done such a good job, I can't actually see where they are. And as I understand it, the reason that the image on the right is slightly darker than the image on the left, that's not to do with the way that they've been treated. It's just an artifact of the light when the two photographs were taken. So we have two of these posters on display in our document area. And the ones we've chosen to display, one of which we can see on the screen here, are not the posters that would have featured in the trams themselves. They are the posters that have been used internally, notes in the printer as part of the design process. So you can probably just about make out on the slide, there's various writing here, various writing there. You can see it's kind of been sort of a bit of a collage effect as well. This wasn't the finished design. So in our collection we have both the prototypes, we might call them, as well as the sort of the finished examples as well. We have about 100, a little more than 100, and they span the years of which the Tramway art was produced, which, as a reminder, is 1922 to I've written 32. I think it actually might be 33. I'm just going to double. Yes, that's a typo. 1922 to 1933. So a 12-year period there. The first set of these posters were produced, as we heard, in 1922, and they were produced in collaboration with another institution that was part of the London County Council's very wide strategic remit, namely the Central School of Art and Design, today Central St Martin's, part of the University of Arts, London. And the initial posters were designed by students at that institution. There were 12 in the first run, of which I believe we have 3 in our collection, but I'm prepared to be corrected on that. We certainly have 3 that are digitised and readily available. And in contrast to the rest of the collection, these are black and white only, and they are the only posters in the collection that feature the London County Council coat of arms, which you can see at the top there. So the purpose of the posters was basically to show that it was affordable, that it was comfortable, and that you can go to interesting places on the tram network. And all of those themes are nicely covered in the selection that we have here. So on the left we can see children's fairs make a trip to the park an inexpensive outing, undercover all the way in the middle, and then Boston Woods travel by tram on the right hand side there. What we're going to do for the the rest of the presentation, we're going to take sort of a gentle stroll, as it were, or a gentle tram ride even, through the collection that we have here. What I've done is I've followed quite closely this excellent reference work, Jonathan Riddle Tramway Art, which there's a copy available in our library, actually on the front desk near the display, and it was published fairly recently in sort of this edition is 2010, and it's still quite easy to get hold of. So if you are interested in this collection, that is well worth a look from one of our library, a local library, or to buy, of course, as well. And sort of for ease of reference going forward, what I've done is I've followed closely the categories that Jonathan Riddell uses. So we'll take a sort of a thematic rather than sort of chronological look through the collection. And the first of those themes that we can see on the screen here was that of London's parks. So the tramways were often used. Well, we might say they were primarily used for commuting, as you would expect. So there is an emphasis in the tramway art, which obviously trying to encourage people to use them more, or use them in different ways on their use for leisure, and obviously London's parks are a big part of that. So we have 3 posters on the screen here, and 2, St James's Park and Hyde Park being obviously the sort of the famous headline parks that we'll be very familiar with. We can see Buckingham Palace and St James's Park there, the Victoria Memorial, and the famous Avery that's part of the lake there as well. And it's sort of lots of charming little details, some of which I'm even just noticing now. We can see the frogs and the rabbits. There's a snail and things as well. And in quite a modern style is the offering for St James's Park, and actually contrasts quite strongly with the Hyde Park poster to the right hand side. We heard that the Central School of Craft and Design designed the first set. They carried on designing them to sort of the mid-1920s, but then they seem to have been phased out. And then we have basically different artists being commissioned to produce the posters. And what this means is we have a very eclectic style, which is I would say, is a big part of their charm. Both sort of more traditional styles with more modern ones alongside it as well. So St James's Park and Hyde Park are obviously then, as now, real kind of premier London attractions, very, very famous. I don't mean any disrespect, but Brockwell Park probably isn't in quite the same category as that. And this is probably the reason that Brockwell Park is included. Is it's a fairly new park in comparison to St James and Hyde Park. Opened to the public in 1892, so only 30 years old at this point as a public park, and it was run by the London County Council's Parks Department as well. So you can see there obviously that modern term, that sort of synergy between the different parts of the London County Council's role being reflected in the tramway art as well. There are the single subject that is covered more than any other in the tramway art is the zoo. So that's London Zoo, of course, as part of Regent's Park. This opened in the middle of the 19th century, and was almost instantly a very popular tourist attraction, and remains so into this period as well. It was so popular that both the Underground Group and London County Councils produced a poster advertising, travel to the zoo every year. So as I say, that's why there are more London Zoo posters than any other. London Zoo has quite a special place in my heart too. I used to live very close to there, had sort of close enough that I could enjoy a sort of season ticket, and so I've spent quite a few fond afternoons wandering around it. So it's nice to see it so well represented here. Unsurprisingly, the animals are a big feature of the designs, emphasising sort of the cute in the Lion Club on the left, but also the sort of the striking and the elegant as well, with the flamingos in the middle and then the toucans on the right hand side. And the toucans is, I think, particularly nice image because we see how kind of the clever use of design and proportion can add sort of intrigue and drama to it. So you'll notice that the toucans do have very large bills, but even larger in this design than they would in real life. The bill is effectively the same length as their body, which would be a bit impractical for the poor bird in real life. So we see that sort of striking use of the bills there as well. And actually, they're not afraid to kind of cover the logo up a bit as well. If I think of the shenanigans that we have sometimes making sure that the various logos that we're using are not obscured by the graphics, I'm rather jealous that they were able to sort of play with here. And it's Tony Castle, you just might be able to see that sign there, was able to put the toucan's beak in front of the tramways. I feel like I think we might have got out of order. Oh, I thought I had 2 slides on the zoo. Obviously that I don't, but I'm not sure what happened there. So it might appear randomly in about 3 or 4 slides' time. So if it does, I apologise for that. And if I've left some out, I apologise for that too. But they will be on display. As I say, they're on display in there. So it's not the end of the world if that's the case. So London Zoo was sort of very popular tourist attraction, and therefore is heavily represented in the tramways poster. But other London sites were used. Were promoted as well, and there's a real emphasis on both on both the kind of the latest things in London, modern London, as we can see in the image on the left-hand side, as well as the more traditional. So London tramways, the Dickens's London in the middle there is emphasising the kind of the older elements of the capital. Not quite as old then as it is now, but still certainly a nod to the traditional as well. And we can see again that actually across all 3 of the posters, this sort of real eclectic style that was often chosen to sort of suit the subject matter. So modern London, funnily enough, has a more modern design, and a more traditional illustrative style used in Dickens's London. And again, probably a slightly more traditional style for London tramways. Doing that for the Seymour of London ride at will on the right-hand side. Probably a bit hard to see at this level of this distance, but again we have that same thing of Brockwell Park punching above its weight perhaps alongside Tower Bridge, Tower of London, Westminster Abbey, and St Paul's Cathedral. And fair play to it, I say. I'll leave this one up for just a moment more. I drove myself slightly mad on the way to work this morning, trying to see if I could work out what all these buildings were. I got the first 4 or 5 quite easily, but there's a couple that I don't recognise, which is making me rather cross. I don't know if I want to put that to the wisdom of the crowd, or like when you do a crossword and you really don't want someone to tell you the answer. So I've not decided yet. So we'll leave that for a moment's time, and maybe we can come back to it if we have time in the Q&A. So we have London being used. We have the posters being used to promote London's sort of tourist industry, and now we have it being sort of used to promote an area, you might say, or emphasising that it can be used to get to particular parts of town. And I think this is one of those examples where you have to always be a little bit suspicious of advertising. That sometimes when advertising kind of makes a lot of effort to draw your attention to something, you have to ask a bit more closely why it's doing that. So this is the theme of these is sort of West End and the City, but actually those are both 2 parts of London that weren't very well served by the London County Council's tram network. As I understand it, and I'm open to more information or even correction on this, this was both in terms of the West End, this is effectively snobbery. So so trams were often seen as a sort of a working class form of transport. They were the cheapest form of transport other than walking, and that's why they were so popular. There was, of course, a certain amount of disruption that comes with putting a tram system in, the digging of the roads to put in the rails, and when they were electrified as well, you have the overhead power lines as well. But probably neither of which were insurmountable. But they were sort of deliberately sort of kept out of Westminster, and that was for reasons of what today we think of as snobbery. And the City, I haven't had a chance to really look into why they didn't have much penetration in the city. But my understanding is it's described as political, and I suspect that's probably to do with this sort of ongoing rivalry between the London County Council and the City of London Corporation. I'd imagine there was a bit of a kind of a turf war element there. I don't know, that's a deduction. So again, when we get to the Q&A, if people are able to shed a bit more light on that, I'd be very interested to hear it. And not only are the posters giving an indication of perhaps places that aren't served that well, they also occasionally kind of mislead as to how well, they mislead as to the extent of the service. So, for example, in this image on the left-hand side here, it says that it serves Tottenham Court Road. It doesn't go along the Tottenham Court Road, it just reaches the northern tip near where it meets the Euston Road. So, like all advertising, sometimes have to take it with a little bit of a pinch of salt. And before we move on, probably worth emphasising again the the eclectic, the juxtaposition nature of the styles here. So kind of very modern and energetic on the left, and then on the right a far more traditional image there as well, and probably misleading in the opposite direction. I can't believe it was ever that quiet walking across. What bridge do we think that is? Southwark Bridge. I can't believe it was ever that state, unless it was very early in the morning. In many ways, the centre of the network was embankment in terms of its busyness, and the embankment and the Kingsway subway in particular were where the north and the southern networks met. There were up to 400. The LCC could advertise up to 400 trams an hour at peak times, which interestingly they describe as at high tide, which gives a nice sense of a different way of understanding busyness. That again, that sense of a working river, of the river being even then a far more important functional bit of the city, rather than not to put it down, rather than the kind of leisure emphasis that it has today. The image on the left is probably one that you will recognise. It tends to be often reproduced as a way to advertise these posters. We've used it for many years to advertise what was then Collage, now the London Picture Archive, because it's just such a striking image. On the middle here we have a nice sort of visual pun. The 1 penny fare being emphasised with the Kingsway Tunnel, and again half a mile more at midday. So part of the purpose, as we've heard of these posters, was to encourage people to travel in their leisure time, to encourage people to travel at times when there was capacity in the network. And just as today, fares are one way of doing that. And then we mentioned as well that the Kingsway Tunnel was sort of the link between the north and the southern parts of the network, or the different parts of the network, and that's kind of implied there with the various branches in this speed and comfort poster on the right-hand side of the image. So we have the museums are well featured as well. We've mentioned already the sort of the changes of the river. I particularly like this image on the left of the Tate described as the Tate Gallery. I like the way that the traditional Thames sailing barge has been used to frame the front of what's now Tate Britain, but was the Tate Gallery then. It would have been remiss, I think, not to include this one. It's a fun image in and of itself, but this is one of the two sort of prototypes that we have on display. But this is the finished version, as it were, for the British Museum. And it would have been wrong of me not to advertise our colleagues over at the Guildhall Art Gallery as well. So you can't get there by tram anymore, but I should emphasise that it's still very much open to the public, and admission is still free. The idea of the different uses of the river is also picked up in this slide here. So we have both the river as a working river and also a leisure site as well. I think of the three, my favourite is probably the by tram to the embankment on the left-hand side here. Particularly like the way that the kind of the sense of energy and choppiness is emphasised in the waves there, and the various sort of framing devices of the bridge, the various bridges, the things, the the boat in the foreground as well. I think there's sort of a lot going on in that image that I think all comes together kind of very nicely, kind of compositionally. And that idea of the river looking sort of one way at one part and another at the other is emphasised by this middle poster here. The Thames at Hammersmith and Putney. Clearly the idea being that you can escape the kind of the hustle and bustle of the city centre by going out to the sort of the western side, and that really lovely sort of sinuous shape there on the sailing boat. And this was new to me. I didn't know, I'm sure some of you did, but in the 1920s and 1930s, there was briefly a beach at Greenwich. So it was an artificial pleasure beach using imported sand. If you're asking for it, I don't know where the sand was imported from. So this was obviously a kind of a little, what's the word, a little enclave for leisure. In otherwise, what at this point would have been a very kind of busy and functional working part of the river. And across all three images, we get a sense of how some of the posters are purely what's the word? They're purely artistic, give the idea to go to this place, but then they do incorporate some functional elements as well. So they are telling you which services that you can use, and that they reward that kind of closer detail as well. So we have the main sail here, but hopefully you can all see we actually have an allusion to the boat race at the bottom there as well. So the different kind of styles and different motifs that are used kind of coming out in the three images there. And we sort of alluded to this with Greenwich and Putney. There was also an emphasis on using the tram service to go kind of further afield to explore the green spaces on the boundaries of London. So we can go as far as Epping Forest to Wimbledon Common on the tramway. And again, we kind of this deliberate sense of some of them say Wimbledon Common. We get a more bucolic idea there as well. The windmill giving a sense of kind of rural oasis and calm. But then Epping Forest of the three probably looks like the most fun. We have the sort of the glamorous lady at the fun fair at the front. The child playing with their dog. The sense of the fun fair with the man hitting the hammer. I forget what that game is called, but I'm sure you know what I mean. And a child with it's either a balloon or a giant lollipop, either of which would be a lot of fun there. So we can see this idea there's something for everyone coming through in the posters that we have. Sometimes, though, the artist decides to emphasise one aspect of a place more than others, and we see that with the selection of images to do with Greenwich Park. So there's obviously a huge amount of history and heritage in Greenwich. A lot of that being maritime, to do with the all the various developments that happened in Greenwich, but we don't see that particularly emphasised in the London County Council Tramways posters. Instead, they generally, with a few exceptions, they emphasise Greenwich Park there as well. And we have three images there. Some things obviously appearing across different ones. So the stag in both the image and in the left in this nice little cutaway, and then a close up there as well. And obviously the people in the middle there. So a nice sort of series of images there, which also indicate that there are kind of popular themes that come up again, and sort of different ways that they can be that they can all be introduced through these posters. I always feel a bit more confident when I'm sort of back on my neck of the woods. Here we have three posters. I just realised I've cut that top out with that bar on the PowerPoint, so my apologies for that. Hopefully they don't interfere too much with the aesthetics of the posters. Here we have three post advertising sort of Hampstead Heath, and Parliament Hill as well, and again choosing to emphasise the potential for a nice day out, but also we get again this idea of the different styles, sometimes actually clashing quite strongly. So this image on the left-hand side of old Hampstead was in 1933. So this is one of the last last posters to be commissioned and produced, and we can see that they've gone for quite a traditional style, and actually it does contrast strongly, even jarringly, with the others on the screen here. And similarly to perhaps the Dickens London one that we saw earlier, and a few others, we can see how it's emphasising the various sites that you can see, the various places that you can go. And I'm also duty bound to point out Keats House there as well, because for a few years we were part of the engagement team there as well. So a little hello there to Keats House, and that again is still available to visit. So should you find yourself in Hampstead, not that you can travel by tram there, Keats House is well worth a visit. And I also, on this poster on the right-hand side, I like the way that there's different elements combined, and in particular, the kind of cut-out box at the bottom, showing the sort of the topography of Hampstead Heath. Obviously, one of the fun things to do over in Hampstead and Parliament Hill, in particular, is to look out at the views and kind of spot what you could know. So it's nice that they've incorporated that as well. And that's probably worth mentioning as well, because another intention behind these posters was actually to give people something to do whilst they were either on the tram or waiting for the tram. There's a nice mention in one of the minutes that relate to this project, saying that they hope that by providing these posters, a 5-minute wait at a tram shed could feel like 5 seconds, and probably quite a nice reminder as well that we're probably so used today to being, having something in front of us the whole time, our phones or something else, that actually that sense that it's maybe part of the responsibility or the hospitality of the London County Council in this case to make that space more inviting, and that's a way to encourage use as well. There's an emphasis on sport and sporting pastimes in the collection as well, and these I think are particularly nice. I think some of you have all already spotted this. They don't make that, the posters are a strikingly visual medium. There's not a lot of wordplay. In fact, this is the only example I can think of as kind of wordplay and jokes being used in the collection. There probably are a couple more, but this is the most striking. Your leg problem solved with a ride by train. If there are any sort of international fans, that's any enjoying international lessons are, that's a cricket reference right there. So you can be bowled out if they hit your leg. If you get hit by the leg, or is the leg side? Well, yeah, I think it's LBW reference. So if the ball hits your leg when it was going to hit the wicket, you're out. So basically, they're saying you don't have to walk. You don't have to walk to the oval. That's the little joke there. We also have this poster in the middle, which is worth advertising the football and showing how you can also get a fixture card and map for free. So many of the arts, some of these posters were reused in different ways, in other promotional literature, which included maps and various brochures. And I think we've got time. I'm going to read you a short passage from one of those minutes, which gives quite a funny little insight into the kind of everyday life of the conductor. It does slightly stray into ageism at one point, so I'm just going to sort of warn you about that in advance. But they're talking about the various things that they can produce as part of their tramway service, and they say pocket maps and leaflets are means by which the story can be told in detail. The best agents for maps and leaflets are inspectors and regulators. Maps and leaflets are the trump card of the zealous official. When dear old ladies have been told over and over again the times of the last cars, when the official's patience is nigh exhausted, they can produce the maps and leaflets like manna in the desert. The best plan is to deliver the goods early in the dialogue. They make a better impression and have the qualities of soothing syrup. So there we go. That was their intention behind the linking with the leaflets. And then on the right-hand side, to football by LCC trams, a nice use of the kind of another visual pun, the ball showing the football showing the fair areas that you can use. A nice little touch there as well. And then that idea of encouraging off-peak travel or advertising the fares is picked up in all three of these. I particularly like the country gate, the road to open spaces, cheap Sunday fare, or the evening out here as well. Always further proof that there's sort of nothing new under the sun. I'm particularly fond of an evening out travel card these days as well, to sort of take the edge off the train fare from my home to central London, and we can see all these ideas kind of coming through as well. And this clock one's particularly strong, showing how the various fares sort of change throughout the day. And we see that again, that same idea of advertising particular tickets, so you can sort of see more of the capital in this series of 3 images. And there's a spot the difference here. I'm sure you have done already. So it was a series of 4 posters, of which we have 3 in our collection, and you can see that the central bit under the magnifying glass has changed. So Victoria Embankment, Eltham Palace, and the Tate Gallery. So to give a bit of interest and sort of extra, what's the word? Extra kind of value for money from the design there. Now, I'm sure by now you all have wanted to travel by tram anyway. But just were there any lingering doubts? The posters also do their best to remind you how quick and how comfortable travel by tram is. So we can see it's basically like flying on Pegasus, as this image on the right-hand side suggests. And we can see how kind of comfortable and spacious they were as well. Remember this advertising, so sometimes we have to look a bit more closely. So by the early 1930s and even slightly before, trams were starting to be seen as an old technology. Indeed, it's likely that they probably would have been replaced. They ran to the 1950s. It's likely had the Second World War intervened, they would have been replaced sooner. And they were having increasing basically competition from motor buses, obviously a bus with an engine, diesel internal combustion engine, and what was called trolley buses as well. So these are buses that are run by electric, but they drive like a bus. They're not dependent on the rails as well. So there was a sense in coming in that the sort of trams were a bit cheap, a bit uncomfortable, and perhaps the technology of the past. And so the advertising was deliberately designed to kind of counter that. And from 1926 onwards, a program of what was called Pullmanisation took place, named after the Pullman car, which was a type of luxury train carriage. So there was basically a real emphasis on making the trams more comfortable, an emphasis on lighting in particular. So there's no coincidence that in this image on the left-hand side, people are reading they're well lit and reading, and they're sort of seen as spacious and comfortable. So again, something that the LCC was very keen to convey. In most of the posters, only very few exceptions, are the posters not headed with London Tramways. But the main exception that you will see is the posters that were used to advertise the trams around Christmas time, where the "Shop Early" slogan was introduced and then repeated throughout the years. Again, we can see this image on the left-hand side emphasising spaciousness, advertising comfort, sort of the stylishness and the upmarketness of the what we're going to assume is the mother and child on the left-hand side there. So these are seen as comfortable ways to get around. Every tram a Pullman. So again, that reference to that Pullmanisation program. I feel like this one hasn't aged well. That looks frankly demonic to me. That child, he's possessed by the Christmas spirit in all the wrong ways. A slightly less terrifying image on the right hand side there. I think I'm a bit happier with a Christmas tree motif and the trams at the bottom there. And the last images that we will see before we take questions come from 1932 and 1933, and these perhaps advertise, these are reference to the less kind of glamorous and less comfortable aspects of tram travel, and they were a reminder of how busy London streets are and then are now and were then as well. So. Trams obviously had to share the road with all other kinds of road users. By the 1930s, private motorists were becoming more common, and basically there was these posters are appealing to the motorists to sort of take care when passing trams, particularly sort of take care when they stop, basically not to overtake them, and sort of keep a mind out for the passengers embarking and disembarking as well. And probably in that there is a reference to the fact that the trams, as we've heard, would soon become a sort of yesterday's technology from that perspective. So 1933 was the last year that the tramways posters were produced, because that's the year when the LCC's trams were incorporated into the let me get it right, the London Passenger Transport Board. As we heard, they ran for about another 19 years before they were decommissioned in 1952, kind of before returning to London streets at around about the millennium. So on that note, we will draw the presentation to a conclusion. I hope you found that interesting. As I say, all of the posters in our collection are available to view on the London Picture Archive. There's a nice spread of them reproduced in the information area, and a couple are on display. And on the 11th of April, so that's a week on Friday, you'll be able to see more of the originals as well. So I hope to see some of you at that event and the various other things we've got coming on. And at that point, I'll hand over to you for any kind of questions, comments, or even dare I say it, corrections. So over to you. And what I will do, just to say, is just to do with the text setup we have. If you ask a question in the room, I will repeat it. I'll repeat it so the people at home can hear what was said. And if it's a kind of a comment or correction, I'll do my best to paraphrase. So we'll just go in order. There's a question here.
The trams got their power presumably from the wheels. How did they get their electric power?
Yeah, so the question was how did the trams get their electric power, presumption the wheels? As I understand it, there were different methods used. So some used power from overhead cables, and some used it from the rails.
They didn't feature the overhead cables in any of the...
Okay, yes, and the comment there, the overhead comments weren't excuse me, the overhead cables weren't featured. I dare say that's one of those things where if you're glamorising something, you don't necessarily focus on those aspects of it. So I think they were sometimes seen as a bit of an eyesore, the cables, or certainly an impracticality. So my assumption would be that's why they've been omitted from the designs. Thank you. Yep.
I noticed in the advert for Hyde Park, 3 of the access points by tram. One was Holborn, one was Bloomsbury, and one was Tottenham Court Road. Now Holborn is a very long way from Holborn, so there's a bit of licence there. Also, one of the posters there said every tram at Pullman.
Yeah.
I remember them after the war, so of course they were getting old by then. They certainly weren't Pullman then.
Okay.
I think even at the time of the 20s and 30s, they wouldn't really be described as Pullman in the proper Pullman sense.
Yes. So there were sort of three things to add there. The first was that some liberties to be taken with the geography with the Hyde Park access. All of the 3 points noted would have been a bit of a walk away. You'll have to remember what the second point was. The final point was saying that gentleman remembers the trams from their childhood, and they certainly weren't all Pullmans, whatever the advertising was saying. And that actually, and that's the other point that was made, was that that's probably a bit of license being taken with the term as well. So using it kind of correctly, it wouldn't really apply. So there's probably that sense of language kind of changing and being sort of slightly used in a way it wasn't originally done to help sell the service. Yeah. Question at the front here.
2 questions, if I may.
Yeah.
I noticed on the restoration slide,
Yeah.
you showed that the poster was printed on card.
Mm-hmm.
So how many were printed on card and how many were printed on paper?
Yeah.
And the second question is London Underground, they were quite clearly marking the print runs of their posters in internal codes. Was that done for London Tramways? Do you know the print runs of the posters?
Yeah. So two questions there. One around one around how many are in this sort of this kind of card format, and how many are in the paper format, and the second was around the how they are marked and the print runs. So we do have. I'm not au fait with it because I didn't catalogue them, but yes, there are internal markings that you can use to identify when they were, obviously the years they were produced and who made them as well. That would, I think, should show on our online catalogue. That would be one way that you could access that. And they are on the London Picture Archive records. It does say that they are how they're marked. So from memory, although I'd have to look closely to give you a precise answer, it's a simple numerical code. So it's like 107, that kind of a thing. And then in terms of the ratio sort of paper and card, I'm not sure. You stumped me there, to be honest. So my understanding with these would be it would be as many as they needed to sort of do the job properly. So I think you're talking a handful, and then I could probably find it if you give me a minute. But in terms of the print run, not extensive. I'm just trying to see if I can find it to hand. No, I don't have it to hand, but enough to put on the trams. But also they featured not only on the trams but also on sheds, like tram sheds and other London County Council premises as well. So not a massive print run, but not insubstantial either, which is a bit of a vague answer. So apologies, not going to give you more detail. Yes.
Do the posters come in different sizes, presumably for shelters and trams?
Yeah, very, very good question, and I should have mentioned that. So the question was, do they come in different sizes? Yes, is the short answer. So the standard size was 28 and a half by 14 and a quarter inches. That was the standard size, and there were some larger sizes available, produced, for different contexts. And sorry, I'm going to make you scroll through the presentation. If we can find, I think it's number 4 with the parks, and what that can actually, you can sometimes see is that the changing of the sizes does impact the design. So this one here of Brockwell Park, that was originally designed as a bigger image, and it's not been terribly well cropped. You can see how the focal point's a bit off, the way where this girl is and the way that she's looking. It doesn't quite work, and that's an artifact of them being produced for different sizes. Thank you. Are there any questions? We'll take some more in the room, but I just want to make sure that people at home don't feel left out. So are there any questions at home? Okay, jolly good. So we'll stay within the room then.
Thank you. You mentioned that the early posters were designed by students at the Central School of Art Design. Do we know anything much more about the other artists? Are there people who went on to have other careers in art and design?
Yeah. So the question was, do we know much about the artists, what they went on to do? So the artists that the London County Council used weren't as famous as the ones used by London I always want to call it London Underground, but that's wrong. Underground group. So they didn't use them on quite the same profile. And like anything, like you'd expect, some had more success than others. Sometimes we can trace them across. They did many posters for tramways and other projects as well. Others we don't have very much information. Like I say, this is a really great reference work, and there are biographies of the artists at the back here. So this is my copy, but there's a copy out there, so that's a good way to follow it up. But one thing that's worth probably is nice to stress about that question is that they were probably more female artists working on these posters than might have been typical at the time, and that's a reflection of the fact that the Central School amalgamated a sort of a women's only design school. I think it was in 1908, and they had quite a sort of egalitarian emphasis that it was being seen at the day. So women are better represented in these artists than they perhaps would otherwise be. Yeah, thank you.
You mentioned there were about 12 a year. Does that mean there was one every month? And then when you went around London, would you just see one poster for that month? So
the question was, there were 12. There were 12 produced a year. Does that mean there were one every month? That's not my understanding. I think they would have been produced throughout the year, and you would have seen you would have seen a new selection every year, obviously with some of them being seasonal, so obviously Christmas is seasonal, but there's some very nice ones around Kew Gardens that are seasonal as well, that are show the autumn colours. That's my understanding, but again, this is where I don't think I said it today, which I should have done. I often say this. It's sort of my job to know sort of a little bit about a lot, so I'm prepared to be kind of correct on that, but that's my understanding. Yeah.
Did they only produce posters? I mean, nowadays you make postcards and tea towels and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I presume in those days it was just purely posters.
Yeah. So the question was, did they only produce posters or did they produce other things? Well, quite rightly saying today you'd have postcards and tea towels and everything else. It was primarily the designs were used for posters, but sometimes those designs were reused. Particularly maps and leaflets is where you'd see them the most. Shameless plug: we have postcards for sale of them. However, like you say, today we make postcards. There are postcards for sale. Should you want one? Yes. So they didn't, we did. Yeah. Are there any other questions in the room? Yes.
One of the posters had a coin representing the Kingsway.
Yeah, that one.
Solely because I can remember my dad showing it to me. Was it a significant piece of infrastructure?
Yes. So the question was about the Kingsway subway and the penny, and the gentleman said that he can remember his dad showing to it. So the question was it a significant piece of infrastructure? Yes, absolutely. So it was important because it linked the north and south sections of the two. In theory, one network, but obviously the river is a barrier to such things, so it was important for that. And it was quite celebrated. And I believe I'm right in saying as well that it was rebuilt in the middle of the 1920s as well. So they were extra keen to emphasise that. And that's the same time that today is the Strand underpass. And interestingly, during the Second World War was used to shelter artworks as well. So it's quite an interesting piece of infrastructure, excuse me. And if you go, I forget quite how far up Kingsway it is, but you can still see the kind of it going down, and you can still see the tram tracks as well. So it can still be seen there. Yeah. Yes.
Does the archive have other posters, and how big is the collection?
Yeah, thank you. So the question was, does the archive have other posters, and how big is the collection? So our collection in general is very big indeed. We have 60 miles worth of shelving, so we're the second biggest archive in the country. And we do have various other posters that would be interesting if you're interested in sort of graphic design. So various other posters in the London County Council collection, which are some, obvious thing that comes to mind is Second World War posters, but various posters as well around all kinds of sort of the terms fall out of my head, but all kinds of public health messaging, all that sort of thing, both in this collection and strongly represented in the Greater London Council collection as well. So that was the body that took over from the London County Council. In fact, some of their posters there around the theme of anti-racism are on display in our information area. So just a little bit on from where the Tramways posters are on display there. So you get a nice sense of sort of 1920s versus 1980s kind of design style there as well. It's quite interesting. Yeah, thank you. Any questions from at home? Okay, well, in which case, unless there are any more questions, we'll draw that to a close. So just behold me to say thank you again. As I hope you know by now, these are a really sort of very very wonderful, lovely, engaging set of posters. So it's been a lot of fun for me the last couple of days, sort of getting to know them a bit better, and a real pleasure sort of sharing that with you this afternoon as well. So thank you all for coming, and we hope to see you at some of the events in the future.